There we go. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today's meeting is being recorded. Please speak directly into the microphone. And I want to welcome a couple of new people to our meeting. Anne Marie Campbell is Executive Assistant to the Superintendent of Schools in Fargo, and Scott Worth is Vice President and HR at Rohr's Management Company. Welcome to both of you. Ashley, can we have a roll call, please?
Campbell. Worth.
Here.
Grinlin.
Here.
Wennis.
Here.
Losi.
Here. Approval of the next order is the approval order of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the April 3rd, 2023 meeting?
Kurt, I move to approve the April 3rd, 2023 minutes of the Civil Service Commission with the following amendments. And I have them written out because there's quite a few, if I can pass them down to you, and I can get it down to Ashley as well. I can read them if you'd like. On page 1, under the Other Present section, insert the name Swanson after the name Ashley. On page 1, under the approval of the February 8th, 2022 minute section, strike January 14th, 2020, and insert February 8th, 2022. On page 1, under the appeal hearing for Katie Rodacker Barch section, second paragraph, line 3, strike the word "are" and insert the word "were." On page 2, first paragraph, line 4, strike the word "we." On page 7, under the final statement from Katie Rodacker Barch section, line 6, strike the word "states" and insert the word "stated." On page 8, under the findings and conclusions section, line 1, strike the word "moves" and insert the word "moved." On page 8, under the findings and conclusions section, line 2, insert the word insert a period after the word Grinlin. On page 8, under findings and conclusions section, line 5, insert a period after the word upheld. On page 8, under the other business section, paragraph 1, line 1, strike the word asks and insert the word asked. On page 8, under other business section, paragraph 1, line 2, insert a period after the word meeting. On page 8, same section, paragraph 2, strike the word postpone and insert the words Chairperson Losi postponed the. On page 8, same section, second paragraph, insert a period after the word meeting. On page 8, same section, paragraph 3, line 1, strike the word suggest and insert the words suggested a. On page 8, same section, paragraph 3, line 2, insert a period after the word clarification. On page 8, under the other business section, paragraph 3, line 3, strike the sentence all, voting a. Motion carried as there wasn't a motion nor a roll call vote. On page 8, same section, paragraph 3, line 4, insert a period after the word meeting.
Is there a motion to accept the adjustments to the minutes of the April 3rd meeting? I don't know if we need a motion.
Yep, I make that motion.
She made a motion with these.
Okay.
So
Is there a second to the motion with the adjustments that Anne Marie Campbell has made?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay. It is now time for the appeal hearing of Jacob LaPlante, and we are going to follow the order laid out. And so we're going to begin the proceedings with an opening statement of the employee.
Okay. Hi, my name's Jake LaPlante. This is my first time going through any type of this kind of procedure or anything, so Beth said I just kind of read my summary to you guys. And let me get that pulled up here. Okay. This would be the part, it would be the A in the agenda or whatever they had given you guys. But on July 17th at 5 p.m., I had received a phone call from Leah and Carissa and JJ asking what had happened on Saturday the 15th. I told them that I had issues with the guest refusing to leave as they were verbally assaulting myself and other guests at this certain guest, as this certain guest has a very long history of doing. And we ask guests that don't follow rules to leave for 24 hours. The guest also made comments about how she was going to make sure that I never worked here or worked another day in my life for harm reduction, as she has done towards myself and other workers. I was then asked if I made any comments, quote, wishing harm, because that's what they said, towards any guests, to which I replied no. I was told I was to be put on leave for alleged comments I was told that I made on Saturday, July 15th, and that I would be able to meet with HR, my coordinator, to discuss the situation within a few days. I called and emailed a couple days later asking when I could meet with HR. I was told Beth was out of the office and that the message would be forwarded to my coordinator. I was confused because as I wanted to talk to HR and not the coordinator. And the next thing I knew, I received a text from Leah stating that I can come in at noon on Thursday the 20th to discuss what happened. When I showed up for the meeting, just to have my termination papers waiting for me on the table, I was not given a clear reason or clarity on what exactly had been reported and given no chance to try and figure out exactly what had even happened. The action proposed by the coordinators was to terminate me immediately. I don't feel like I was ever had the support of my coordinator and felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells due to other situations when I was alleged to break rules in the past. Other situations where I was like target of gossip and stuff. I was also told by Camilla and Leah at the time of my termination that there was nothing I could do as far as getting a different investigation done or to try to appeal the termination. Only after talking with Beth after she returned to work the following week was I told the correct information regarding filing an appeal, which I did so immediately. I guess that's pretty much the summary of everything there.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. Now we'll have an opening statement by the appointing authority.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Nancy Morris, and I'm the City Attorney for the City of Fargo on behalf of the City of Fargo in this instance. As you know, the City of Fargo is very deliberate and diligent in its employment processes. It is the City of Fargo's position that Mr. LaPlante was terminated for cause and not for an improper purpose or other political reasons. To be sure, working at the harm reduction services are challenging positions, and there is a fair amount of turnover. The clientele can be very difficult, in part due to addictions, mental health, and circumstances. The city recognizes this and tries to work with employees to help them succeed and thrive in what can be a very rewarding career. In other words, the city does not terminate employees for no reason. That is simply counterintuitive to managing the harm reduction team. The city had good reason to terminate Mr. LaPlante's employment. His termination was the culmination of inappropriate and unacceptable behaviors over the course of his just over 1 year employment term with the City of Fargo. His supervisors tried to correct his behavior. He was referred to Employee Assistance Program for additional help. He was directed to participate in anger management classes, and there were numerous and repeated coaching sessions with his supervisors. His supervisors and the appointing authority will address some of those conducts. He continued to raise his voice, respond aggressively, and speak derogatorily about staff and guests. It simply became necessary to terminate his employment when it became clear that Mr. LaPlante was not able to succeed in the harm reduction services environment. His termination was with cause, and we will be asking that you make that finding at the end of this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Employee witnesses, if you have any.
No, unfortunately, the people I asked, they didn't feel comfortable doing it because they didn't want to have any friction with the employer, so. Yeah, they told me that they couldn't, so.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Appointing authority witnesses.
Thank you. I would ask Leah Seward-Oberg to come to the podium, and I will pose several questions to her she was directly involved in the decision-making in this instance. And I know this is a strange setup, but I'm going to try not to put my back to you and speak to Leah. So, sorry. Okay. So, Leah, if you could just start with your name and your role, please.
Yep, my name is Leah Sievert-Oberg. I am the program coordinator for the Downtown Engagement Center.
How long have you been with the City of Fargo?
I have been with the city, it'll be 12 years in October. The first year I was an advocate, and then I moved into a coordinator role.
What is your educational background and experience?
I am a licensed social worker. In the past, I have been an administrative assistant for the Division of Juvenile Services for 8.5 years. I was also a foster parent and did Safe Bed with Path Southeast.
Okay, thank you. Do you directly supervise, or did you directly supervise Jacob LaPlante at the time of his termination?
Yes,
Okay. What was his position?
he was a harm reduction advocate.
Okay. Was he always with the Downtown Engagement Center where you supervise, or was he transferred to that position?
He started as an overnight staff in the shelter setting, and he had stated that the overnights were really hard, and there had been an incident at one time, so we had moved him over to the engagement center so he could have more supervision and other training opportunities.
Okay. What are some of the responsibility of his position at the DAC, the Downtown Engagement Center?
Okay. The responsibilities of our harm reduction advocates is really to build relationships with the guests so that they're able to connect them to services to help them move on, move into housing, get connected with whatever kind of services that they need. Jacob did a lot with also helping to monitor the building, as it's a very big building and a lot of people coming in. And he assisted guests with their basic needs, providing showers, laundry, and locker services.
Okay. Did Mr. LaPlante have frequent contact with guests in the deck?
Yes, that is a daily thing for all of our harm reduction advocates. It's, again, building that relationship.
Okay. I'd like to turn now to the events that led to the termination. We'll come back a little bit to some of that background information, but if we could turn now to the July 15th incident. What was reported to you regarding that July 15th incident?
I was forwarded an email and a text message from 2 staff members, and both reported that Jacob made comments regarding a specific guest, saying that she was a stupid bee. I don't know if I should say swear words. And that she deserved to get her butt beat.
Okay. And did you then interview and conduct an investigation regarding
Yes.
those statements to you?
Yes.
Okay. Who did you speak to at that time?
I spoke with both Yvonne Eichhorn and Raven Ware, as they
Okay.
were the ones reporting the incident.
Okay. Did you also talk to Jacob about those events at any time?
We did. We had a phone call with myself and two other program coordinators, Jordan Joshua and Carissa Rayan, where we had called to review the situation with Jacob. At that time, he stated he did not make any comments.
Okay. Did you find the witnesses to be credible at the time that you discussed the matter with them?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Did you discuss the facts and the circumstances with your supervisor and a representative from Human Resources?
Pardon?
And a representative from Human Resources? Did you discuss those facts and
Yes.
circumstances?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, okay. Have you been involved in past discipline coaching and training with Mr. LaPlante to address similar inappropriate and unacceptable behavior?
Yes, there was a situation on October 11th of last year, 2022. And most of the coaching and discussions that we had with him were to try to help him better respond to circumstances and events happening around him and to address anger issues.
Okay. Did you have several discussions in the form of coaching? Do you have kind of a recitation of those dates? I think the staff notes are pretty complete
Yeah.
as to those. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yep, there were several. I have a few specific written down. Back on September 1st of 2022, Danny Gerving, who is another program coordinator, he started off under her supervision at the shelter. They had a conversation after a situation arose between him and another staff member. And during the discussion, Danny reported that Jacob did raise his voice at her several times and repeated that this was bullshit and unfair.
Okay. Did you also witness another time in which Mr. LaPlante may have escalated a situation with the guest?
Yes, I was working on October 11th when Jacob came throughout the building. He was very upset at a situation that happened with a guest outside. He continued to state that the guest was a effing piece of shit and tried to calm him down. He wasn't able to calm down and he ended up leaving work at that time on his own.
Okay. Were there other instances that, I'll go back. So as a result of that incident, did you take action and suggest a referral for Mr. LaPlante to Employee Assistance Program?
Yes, we did.
Okay. What was that referral, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
The EAP referral was made so Jacob could potentially learn coping skills, how to regulate his emotions when stressful situations arose, and knowing when to walk away from a situation. Jacob had agreed at the time that it would be helpful for himself.
Okay. So the behavior that you're talking about now is not been an acceptable behavior in the workplace at any time, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Did you have other discussions in the form of coaching and attempting to bring him along as an employee of the harm reduction services?
We had met several times, not just myself, but other coworkers as well. We had also, at one point, this would have been in November 6th of 2022, Jacob did complete a course called Managing Anger that's on Relias, which is one of our training programs that we use for staff.
Okay. And any other conversations that you may have had with Jacob or Mr. LaPlante over that time?
Yes. The leadership team met with Jacob on several occasions, like I was saying. On October 31st of 2022, there was the incident with the coworker we had kind of referenced before. She was trying to coach him and reported that he was very explosive, rude, and defensive, and he did walk off, leave work that time without reporting to a supervisor. On September 1st, after that incident, Danny Gerving, who again was his supervisor at that time at the shelter, spoke with him regarding the incident and reviewed how leaving the shift was a safety concern for guests and his co-workers. He had raised his voice several times during that conversation per her report, and also stated that it was bullshit and unfair several times.
Okay. Turning now back to July 15th, 2023, why was the decision ultimately made to terminate Mr. LaPlante's employment as the harm reduction advocate?
Due to the incident, again, we had gone over it in the past when this happened with another guest. There was a couple of different things during that day. One, he was unable to just step away from the situation, like we had talked about before, knowing when to step away. And later in the afternoon of that day, he also was reportedly heard by the two staff members, again, saying that the individual needed to have her, or should have her, I just don't want to say all the words, butt kicked, and that she should be slapped and things like that.
Okay. To clarify one thing, one of the witness statements that was presented by Mr. LaPlante was one of the witnesses that you had interviewed during this process, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you feel that her testimony at the time of your investigation supported that the conduct from Mr. LaPlante was inappropriate?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. And so she confirmed at that time, so there was confirmation in addition to the text and email that you had received from another employee?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I would like to ask Jan Eliason just to address the circumstances a little bit here too. Good afternoon, Jan. Can you please state your name and for the recording and your position and what role you play in harm reduction services?
My name is Jan Eliason. I'm the Director of Harm Reduction, the Harm Reduction Division for Fargo-Cass Public Health, which includes the Engagement Center and Gladys Ray Shelter and a number of other programs.
Okay, thank you. Do you work closely with Leah Siewert-Oberg regarding employment matters?
Yes,
Okay. Were you aware of issues and concerns regarding Mr. LaPlante's employment and in particular his inappropriate behavior?
yes.
Okay. In what sense were you aware of those? Had you had meetings with him and others? And just give us a little bit of a background on that.
When there were incidents, you know, either Leah or an on-call supervisor let me know what was happening. They provided a summary. I did try to take opportunity to talk with Jacob when I saw him. It wasn't a formal, like, let's meet at this time, because they'd already done that. And we just talked through some of his, you know, really unique perspective that he brought to the table, and that these were the things, his angry reactions, you know, were going to be the things that really kept him from contributing the way he wanted to.
Okay. Were you involved in the discussion when he was referred for EAP?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And were you involved in at least a couple of the coaching meetings and having those discussions with them? Was there at least one incident that you and Ms. Oberg were in the room with Mr. LaPlante?
Yes.
Okay. Did Ms. Oberg consult with you following her investigation of the incidents as reported by Ms. I'm going to say Eichhorn? Yes. Okay. And what kind of role did you play in that? Did you follow up with Ms. Oberg to confirm the investigation was complete and that you had necessary information to make a
Yes,
decision?
I followed up with her and another one of the coordinators to make sure that, you know, the information they had was in fact solid information and that they had documentation of that.
Okay. And were you involved in the conversations with the HR department regarding that event or those events?
I believe
and
so,
Mr.
yes.
LaPlante's? Okay, thank you. Based on the facts known to you at the time, including your known history with Mr. LaPlante for the referral to EAP and others, do you feel that the decision to terminate Mr. LaPlante was appropriate?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. I have had just a couple of more witnesses, just for a little bit more information. I'm going to turn this way because I've got Beth next, just to ask a couple of questions as the HR representative that was involved closely throughout this process. So Beth, if you could just explain your role and how you're involved in this process.
Sure. I am Beth Wigman. I'm the Assistant Director of Human Resources. At the time of this, I was the HR manager that is the liaison for the Harm Reduction Services Division.
And what is your role as the liaison to a department? How do you work with those, the departments?
Sure. So in situations such as this, I would act as an advisor to the department to help guide them in determining the appropriate steps in these employment-related decisions based on the information that the department has provided to me and also the information that I have obtained through my own interactions within the department.
Okay. Were you involved with the employment matters pertaining to Jacob LaPlante's employment?
Yes, I was involved in the preparation of the written warning for the shift abandonment on September 12th of '22, after he had become frustrated when working with a harm reduction guest. I was also a part of the EAP referral on 10/21 of '22 for conduct that was similar to that, for which the termination was determined the appropriate course of action.
Okay. Could you please explain the EAP referral process? And did you have a conversation with Mr. LaPlante at the time regarding appropriate workplace conduct?
The harm reduction leadership team had established a pattern of Jacob becoming overwhelmed, walking out of his shifts without prior authorization, and speaking inappropriately to guests, coworkers, and supervisors. The purpose of the EAP referral was to help Jacob in developing coping skills when engaged in these similar types of workplace situations that would become overwhelming for him. At the time of the referral, I did participate in a conversation with Leah, Jan, and Mr. LaPlante regarding the expectations of appropriate interactions with harm reduction advocates and their guests. At the time of referral, he had accepted that his behavior was problematic and did welcome the resource of the EAP.
Okay, thank you. Now let's turn to the termination. What was your role in making that decision?
Sure. When the termination was being considered, I became involved to ensure that there's uniformity across all departments and also to ensure that proper processes are being followed. So I was approached by Leah regarding the latest occurrence of Jacob making disparaging remarks about a guest and worked with her through the process of determining that termination was the appropriate action.
Okay. The decision to terminate is actually made by the appointing authority, by the department, is that correct?
Correct.
So you're just providing guidance to that appointing authority for making that decision?
Exactly.
And support, okay. Have you spoken to or communicated with Mr. LaPlante since the termination?
Yes, I have. We had met following his termination to conduct an exit interview, and so we did have a conversation via Microsoft Teams at that time. And since then, we have communicated primarily by email, a couple of phone conversations as well.
Okay, were a lot of those communications about process?
We did have some conversations about the civil service appeal process. There were also conversations directed toward his concerns about the reasons for termination, feeling unsupported in the workplace, and then he had denied that any of the events between himself and the guests had occurred.
Okay. Has any information been presented to you throughout those exchanges and communications that would suggest to you that the termination was not with cause?
No, I feel that Jacob has not accepted responsibility for his actions and does continue to deny that the situations have occurred. And I think that his lack of recognition in this responsibility for these matters further confirms to me why the termination was necessary.
Okay, thank you. I have two short witnesses left, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to ask Camilla Van Dyke to approach the microphone. Good afternoon, Camilla. Could you please introduce yourself and just provide a little background on your role in the HR department?
Sure. My name is Camilla Van Dyke. I'm an HR manager. I don't directly serve the health department, but Beth was out of the office during that week, so we kind of take turns taking calls. And when Beth was out that week, I kind of responded to the calls that came from the health department.
Okay, so you were working with the health department during that week and had communicated with Ms. Oberg and Ms. Eliason, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you then meet with Mr. LaPlante to inform him of the decision to terminate?
Yes, I was part of that meeting.
Okay, and when did that take place?
July 20th, 23.
Who else was present at that meeting?
Leah and I were in that meeting,
Okay, so just the two of you in that meeting?
just the two of us.
Okay.
Yes.
What happened when Mr. LaPlante was informed of that decision?
He became very upset. He started saying a lot of profanity directly at Leah. He got up from his chair and he started yelling. Leah and I tried to calm him down and ask him to give us an opportunity to explain the termination, but he wasn't listening. So he grabbed the letter from my hand and signed and asked a couple questions about his last paycheck. And then he opened the door and yelled a couple more profanity words and he walked out of our office.
Okay. Were you alarmed by that conduct?
Yes,
Okay. Were others in the Human Resources Department alarmed by that conduct?
yes, there was a staff member outside of the conference room and the door was shut and she heard the yelling and went to get somebody in our office to assist with the situation.
Okay. So you did advise the facilities protection officer of the situation at that time?
Yes, our director, Joe Manette, went and asked for assistance.
Okay. Was this behavior somewhat consistent with what you understood to be a basis for the termination?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And finally, I have a couple of questions for Desi as the appointing authority, and I'll have Desi introduce herself as there are new members and explain your role, please.
Hi, I'm Desi Fleming. I'm the Director of Fargo Cass Public Health and have been with the Health Department for 31 years.
And what is your role as the director and with each of the departments?
So typically my role, I work very closely with all of the division managers on any staffing issues, including any disciplinary action or terminations that might be coming forward.
Okay. Did you confirm the decision to terminate Jacob LaPlante was based on his inappropriate conduct and language?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your opinion that Mr. LaPlante was terminated for misconduct and therefore for cause?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions or witnesses.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, we'll have commission questions of the employee and employee witnesses, if there are any.
I do have a couple of questions for Mr. LaPlante. It's been stated today, and it's in our material, that you welcomed the EAP referral. Was that an accurate statement?
Yes, sir.
And why did you welcome that type of referral?
Because at that time, it was mandatory for the situation that I had gotten into when we had a guest that was, he was trying to assault me with a garden tool, and that was the one time that I had left the downtown engagement center. So that was part of my, it was a mandated thing to
Okay.
continue employment.
Okay. How long did that support from the EAP continue?
I went to 4 or 5 visits over a few months or so. I had a good relationship with the counselor. I was exhibiting very positive improvements, and I guess you know, figuring out which coping skills I could rely on better, different ways to process emotions, a lot of different stuff, you know. It was a very positive experience, and I thought I had worked through a lot of the stuff that had, you know, that I guess I, you know, had occurred in those situations. I thought I'd worked through all that, you know.
Okay, thank you. For the incident regarding the incident that we're discussing about July 15th,
Yeah.
I would be interested in hearing a very, very concise description of, from your words, what happened that day.
Okay. Well, I guess it would have started with that employee, just that, or like everything that happened.
Okay, I'll be more specific. I'll ask a couple questions. So it's been stated, and it's in our written material, some of the derogatory and inappropriate comments that you've made. You've denied making those comments. Can you tell us what, if any, comments you did make regarding that guest?
Yeah, no, I deny making the comments. I'm not sure exactly what comments that they were even talking about. I finally had gotten the actual letter or whatever from the employee, from Yvonne, when the letter she had sent to the coordinator with, you know, describing what I guess I had said and what
Okay.
I did. I mean, I just gotten that a couple days ago.
Okay? And again, you deny making those comments to the
Correct.
guest?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I had gotten 3 letters from my coworkers I was working with that day. The only one that didn't do it was Yvonne. They all attest that I never made any comments and that I've never made any comments. I've always been really passionate about helping out guests, and I was just really shocked when it happened.
But yet, one of the reasons for the referral to the AP several months ago, at that time, was for inappropriate comments, correct?
It was a lot more than just that, though.
Okay.
I was getting assaulted, and I was trying to get my coworkers, you know, to come help me and address it, and nobody was hearing me out. We just gotten out of a meeting, and it was just, you know, I couldn't get anybody to listen. I felt unsafe. I did not feel, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, I did make some comments. I had no problem taking accountability for that. You know, I worked really hard on myself. I'm in recovery. I have almost 3.5 years clean. I worked really hard on my character defects. It's part of the program.
Okay.
I have no problem admitting when I am at fault, you know?
Thank you for that. Just a couple, if you indulge me, I just have a couple more questions. We've heard testimony today and in the written material that you, there, on more than one occasion during your employment with the city, you've left a shift early without appropriate approval. Would you agree to that? Would you agree with that comment, that statement?
Well, yeah, the other incident that when I left early is when I had one of my coworkers was just trying to like pick a fight and verbally just degrading me.
Okay.
And I had tried to reach out to my supervisor. She didn't answer because it was an overnight shift. It was super early in the morning.
Okay.
I didn't get a hold of her until I'd already gotten home, and she told me that we'd work the situation out to just go chill because I was, you know, I wasn't feeling good to begin with. And, but no, the only thing I said is what was in the report. This
So
is
you
bold.
have left more than one shift early without approval, is what I'm hearing your answer to be?
Yes.
Okay. One last question. Regarding the termination meeting that you had on July 20th, is the testimony we heard today, in your opinion, accurate as far as you raising your voice, becoming upset, using profanity to the city employees that were present and could also be heard outside of the conference room?
I might have swore a few times, but I was just crying, you know. I talked kind of loud to begin with. I was bawling. I was severely crushed. Like, I wasn't being aggressive. I stood up and asked, that's when I asked if there's anything I could do to get an appeal because I don't want to sit here and cry in front of you guys. And they both looked at each other and said no. And I said, because I would like to leave,
Okay.
you know?
All right, that's all I need. Thank you, Mr. LaPlante. That's all I have.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman. Jacob, the witnesses that you have written statements from at least 2 witnesses, is that correct? 3. Yeah.
I had the letters from 3 of my coworkers that
Letters from 3, 4. Were they
Yep.
witnesses to the July 15th incident?
I had none that would come forth because they felt like they might, you know, it caused too much conflict between the employer and themselves.
Or any of these 3 that have provided written statements, were they witnesses to the July 15th incident?
Yes, they were all there. They were all present. They all couldn't believe that I got terminated. It's stated in their letters that I've always been a good worker. I've had struggles in the past, but I've worked through them. And, you know, those things happened like last year when I was just starting out. I didn't have the skills that I needed to properly deal with situations because we weren't really trained in. We were kind of thrown in the hot water per se. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kurt, I have a couple questions. To follow up on the question just asked, the 3 individuals who provided letters, were they there on shift and witness the actual incident, or are they just on shift that day?
They were all present around me. Raven is the one that I had radioed when the guest was refusing to leave after saying some really disrespectful to myself stuff to myself and other guests. That was kind of her little thing she would do. I don't know why. She was seeking attention. She would come in quite often and do the same behaviors, you know. She threatened that I wasn't going to be working anymore for Fargo, and I guess she was right. But it's just, I just don't understand it, you know. There wasn't really any incident of me making any comments because it, you know, as it states in their letters, I wasn't making any comments, you know. The absolute only thing that could have been taken out of context was when I was at the computer and I was describing things that were occurring on the security camera when there was a fight going on. But I would never wish any harm towards any guest. I respect all of our guests very much. I'm very passionate about helping people. And I've been just absolutely crushed by this whole thing. So.
When you share that you were describing what was happening on the camera, and you say that in your written materials as well, so do you deny making the comments that the appointing authority has indicated that you made during that time?
Yes, no, I deny making those comments, absolutely.
In your time in your position, do you agree that you had many coaching conversations that have been described here today by the testimony?
I mean, not really. There was like promises of being more trainings and stuff, but a lot of them never never materialized because we just didn't have staff to do it. But yeah, I not really, honestly, like we were kind of like all of us advocates, we were kind of just thrown in hot water. I didn't feel like we had that much direction. There wasn't clear ways or clear, concise leadership around. It was just kind of a mess, you know. So no, I don't remember having like any specific coaching calls or coaching sessions with them. Every time I talk to them, like every behavior was compared to those situations, you know. Like the only compliments I would get were like, well, good thing you didn't freak out and leave, you know. And it's like, and I would say that, you know, I was uncomfortable with that being brought up constantly. I'd worked through my EAP. I held myself accountable for those situations. You know, sorry, I'm going a little off topic, but
Well, thank you for sharing. Through your time with EAP and your conversations with your supervisors, were you under the understanding that confrontational behavior and use of profanity would be problematic in the future for you?
yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from commissioners for the employee? Michael, do you have any comment?
I don't, no, thank you.
Then we're going to progress to the commission questions for the appointing authority.
I do have a couple. I'm not sure who to direct them to, so I'm going to ask them, and maybe the appropriate person can respond. Is that allowed?
Yes?
Okay. In regards to the EAP referral and subsequent support, how long did that support last with Mr. LaPlante, between Mr. LaPlante and the village?
I'm going to look to either Beth or Leah on that, I believe.
As Jacob had stated, he had gone to 4 sessions, and we had received an email just within the last month or so saying that he had been doing really well, was showing up for the sessions and everything.
When you say an email in the last month saying that he had been showing up and had been going well, are you, so like the June timeframe?
I am going to say, I think it was in July. That's one
In
date I
July.
don't have in front of me.
But the
Yeah.
referral was actually made in October of last year. So was there no,
So the village did give us updates
Okay.
every month or so.
okay, so there
Saying
was,
that he was showing.
so there was
That's the
ongoing
only
support
information we
from
received.
October till July?
Yeah,
Okay, I just wanted a little bit of clarification there.
okay.
And then, earlier it was mentioned, this is maybe not necessarily for you.
I'm just going to stand
Yep.
up just in case.
About anger management. I don't know if that was a requirement after a situation or several situations or a recommendation. But then I think I also heard that Mr. LaPlante completed an online anger management training. Okay,
That is correct.
Okay.
I believe that had come up. We have the Relias program, which staff can go on and look up any kind of thing, really.
Sure.
I was not a part of the setting up of him doing that one, but he had completed the report on, I believe it was November 6th, 2022.
any idea at all of how long of a course that is?
Yep, it was 45 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I have at this point.
Any other questions for the appointing authority?
Mr. Chairman. Leah, I just have a quick question about, do you have a disciplinary action that you follow? After so many events, this happens, this happens, this happens. Was there such a thing for Jacob, that you followed this disciplinary procedure for him?
Yep, anytime anything comes up with a staff, we always talk to HR to see which route that we need to go. We do have, it's all really helping us decide what we need to do.
So you and the HR department did that
Yep.
together and came up?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any videos of any of these interactions that Jacob had with staff? Do you have videotapes or anything like that?
I would have to see on the incident that was, I can't remember if it actually got saved, the one back in October, January. My dates are going away, hold on. The most recent one, we do not. But the one back in, October,
Okay.
we may
You may.
potentially have a video left of that.
Yeah.
I would have to look.
Okay. Thank you.
Anne Marie, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. In our written materials that we received, it indicated that after the July 15th incident, an investigation occurred. Do we have any written documentation from that investigation? Was there a written report that was created from that?
We did not do a written report in Human Resources. We have the documents from the employee who had reported, and then just the supervisory notes that were included in your packet.
Okay, and then 2 people were interviewed, 2 other staff members were interviewed as part of that investigation, was that correct?
Correct, the one that had emailed that's included in your packet, and then Raven Ware had texted Leah as well, and so those were the 2 that had been interviewed.
Okay, thank you. In our written materials, there's the section of staff notes. Whose notes are these that we were provided?
So those notes are kept by the harm reduction leadership team, and so there is a combination. There are 4 program coordinators that would access those notes whenever there is something noteworthy to document about an interaction with the staff. So not necessarily formal action each time, but as you can see, notes about coaching sessions that may have occurred or conversations or even situations that just needed to be documented.
So during Mr. LaPlante's time in harm reduction, he only had the disciplinary action that was listed in his termination letter and the ones that we received in our meeting materials, correct? There wasn't any other official action taken?
Correct. There was the formal written and then the EAP referral, which isn't necessarily considered disciplinary action.
Sure. One follow-up question for the EAP information. It was indicated that he attended 4 sessions. Did he successfully complete his EAP?
We did receive confirmation from the EAP provider that he was being released from the referral.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. No more questions at this time.
Thank you. Mike, do you have any questions?
No, I think we've covered most of it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sensing I have no questions, sensing any more, there are no more questions for the appointed authority, we will have a final statement by the employee.
Okay. I guess I'm just asking for the commission to look at the facts, look at my coworkers' letters that I was working with that day. They clearly state that they believe I was not fired for the right reasons. They stated that I did not make any comments that day or ever that they could recall. They also vouched for my positive work ethic, and that I worked my best to help our guests access resources and very passionate about them and could relate to them well because I have been through a lot of the similar situations during my life. As I mentioned before, I'm a few weeks short of 3.5 years clean. I work a 12-step program. I apply the principles of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to my daily life. I'm very diligent about making my meetings. I have been part of NA for years and years, and the 12 steps are very important to me. They failed to mention in the reports what led to me leaving my shifts, you know, the situation with the coworker barraging me, and then when I was assaulted and didn't feel safe. I took accountability for actions and completed my EAP successfully just a short time before I was terminated. When I told my friends and family about this situation, they were just absolutely stunned because such behavior is not in my character whatsoever. I've never been a violent person. I am very reasonable to work with. I've admitted my faults in the past experiences and have worked diligently on my character defects throughout my experience in recovery. And I have never had a problem being honest and taking responsibility for my side of the street, as they say. I feel that the reason for the termination was not assessed correctly, and I was not given any chance to talk to them regarding the alleged behavior, except for the 5-minute phone call on the Monday night at 5 p.m. when I was in my car on my way to an NA meeting. I would like this to be taken off my employment records, and I feel that I should at least get paid through the suspension till the day I was terminated, which would have been that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I don't know. I guess I just really ask you guys just to look at my coworkers' statements. This whole situation's just felt like a bad dream. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know why Yvonne would say all those things and not just come talk to me. Like, we've talked through stuff, like, we're advocates, we're supposed to be able to talk to people. And if my coworker, it just didn't make any sense, that she wouldn't just approach me instead of going to the coordinator immediately, But yeah, I just ask you guys to look at the facts and let the truth come to light. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Jacob. We'll have a final statement by the appointing authority.
As the Director of Public Health, I recognize that the harm reduction environment and daily work with vulnerable individuals is rewarding, but can also be very challenging. We work hard to provide a safe and healthy environment for staff and guests. Mr. LaPlante's conduct and statements in an admittedly difficult situation were simply unacceptable, and it was apparent there was nothing more that could have been done to help him be a productive team member. Due to repeated behaviors, staff and guests were at risk, and it was indeed necessary to terminate his position as a harm reduction advocate. His termination was for misconduct, was with cause, and was not for an improper or otherwise impermissible reason.
Thank you. I will now open up the floor for discussions of the appeal amongst us. Does anybody on the commission want to discuss?
So, Mr. Chairman, as I see it, it's his word against the appointing authority. I didn't do anything that they're saying I did, and there's quite a list of things that they're saying. That's why I asked for some other evidence if there was something else we could review, if there was a video or something of even part of one incident that would, kind of seal the case, because Jacob said there isn't any incidences, really. This is being made up. So I guess, absent of that, I don't know how we make a concrete determination. Except that, the history of the city of Fargo and the appointing authority and this HR department regularly and routinely do the right thing for the employees and the citizens of the city of Fargo. So it is hard to, doubt what the appointing authority is saying here. It is very difficult. We've had a lot of experience with, hearings with the appointing authority, doing the right thing, doing their due diligence, following procedures, discipline procedures, and they do an excellent job with that. So they certainly have that on their side. And I don't believe that anybody in here is looking just to terminate somebody just for the fun of terminating somebody and making up, incidents that they say happened. I think that's where I'm at. I think that's where this, commission is at, most of the time.
Anne Marie, do you have any comment?
I agree that one side says one thing and one side said another. There is a short written documentation presented to us during his employment of negative actions, as stated in the termination letter, for our consideration to uphold the termination.
Mike, do you have any comment? I can't hear you.
Michael, you might be muted still.
There we go.
There you go.
What I was saying is that I do agree that being a harm reduction advocate at the Downtown Engagement Center would be challenging, can be rewarding, but it's also very difficult. But at this point, I would like to make the motion that the disciplinary action, the termination of Jacob LaPlante, was not motivated by political or other improper considerations.
Well, we're a step ahead, but that's okay. For a discussion, I don't think that the last event was the only trigger for this. There was, other events and that led up to this. This was the trigger of his suspension. He had been warned previously that his actions would end up in termination, and therefore I think that every effort by the appointing authority has been given to hold him responsible.
I guess my only comment would be that I believe the city, the authority, has provided very, very good documentation of coaching and concerns over the employment of Mr. LaPlante's time in his position. I don't discredit Mr. LaPlante in going through the EAP support and successfully completing that and attempting to better himself and his character and how he approaches things. But also, it's one thing to learn and gain that knowledge, but then also putting it into execution, into day-to-day practice, whether it's in your personal life or professional life. So that's all the comments I have at this time.
I sense there's a motion on the floor from Mike Wennis to uphold the appointing authority's action. Is there a second to that motion?
I would second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? I guess we've had our discussion. If not, Ashley, would you call roll?
Campbell,
Aye.
Worth,
Aye.
Grinlin,
Aye.
Wennis,
Aye.
Losi.
Aye. Sensing no more action required, thank you, Jacob, for attending, and thank you for the appointing authority. It's a difficult decision for us to make, and nobody wants to have anybody fired, but your appeal has been denied. Thank you.
Is there anything I can do to have this looked at?
You have an appeal process to the city, directly to the city commission if you so wish.
Okay, so I address it with them then? Okay, thank you.
Other business. Other business before us. I'm going to change the order of our agenda slightly, and we want to go into the what do we want to do here? A policy discussion, appeal process discussion that proposed changes to 300-008A. And I think that Jill will have to run us through this, what changes are made and why.
Yes, thank you. So you all have a copy of the revised policy in front of you. Commissioner Wennis, we will get one emailed to you here since you are remote. But we'd previously discussed a review and update of the appeal hearing for disciplinary action. So since that discussion, Beth and Nancy and I have been going through a process of policy review. And so we do have some initial revisions that we are recommending that we would like to discuss. So again, we have the draft in front of you that is marked up with the proposed changes. No doubt as we review, you will have discussion and likely have recommendations as well as to how we can clarify and update our appeal hearing procedures. Ultimately, any policy revisions that come out as a recommendation from the Civil Service Commission will then go through our normal policy review process, ultimately with the City Commission for their approval. So we really just wanted to kind of walk through kind of point by point, and recognizing you've not seen this today, we thought, or before today, I should say, we thought we could kind of talk through what the revisions are, the reason that we think it clarifies, or the reason we think there's a need for change. And I'll point out when we get to that point to the change that was recommended by the commission itself following one of the last hearings. Are there any questions or comments before we begin walking through the policy?
I have none. Would you
Okay.
proceed?
Perfect. And Beth and Nancy, please jump in here as we make our way through. The second paragraph on the first page really just changes the verbiage and clarifies the role. So I'll just read through that briefly. The responsibility of disciplinary action and/or discharge rests with the appointing authority. The role of the Civil Service Commission in the hearing process is to consider whether or not the employer decision was factually supported and to ensure that such disciplinary actions are not motivated by political or other improper considerations. And again, through our discussion, we felt that added verbiage just lends some additional clarity to the role of the Civil Service Commission when we hold a hearing. Any comments or discussion on that before we move on to the next? Okay. Under section 1A, we did add a reference to under the rights and responsibilities of the employee, that employees in regular positions as defined by policy 200-004 employment definitions are governed by the civil service system. We really just wanted to add some clarity there to which employees are covered and which employees are not. That is covered in our employment definition policy. And so rather than duplicating that in its entirety, we make a reference to that employee, but or to that policy, I should say. But essentially, it's not changing the meaning of or the intent as to who would be covered or not, just to clarify where that specific information can be found. And then we have had a lot of discussion over how to best refer to timelines within this policy. And some of our termination meetings or meetings that result in unpaid suspension that allow employees to appeal that action, some occur in person. And sometimes based on circumstances, it's either a choice of us at the city or a choice of that employee that we not meet in person. And so sometimes we're notifying through the mail. Occasionally those meetings could happen virtually or over the phone as well. Typically they're going to happen in person, but again, sometimes circumstances warrant a different venue. So we really wanted to clarify how we track time and the number of days, for example, in this case, from the time the written notice of the disciplinary action is given until that person's window closes for them to submit an appeal. And Nancy was very helpful in this, coming up with this language. So Nancy, do you want to cover this part of it? I can address that. So of course, we're looking at legal rules for rules for service and things like that. So we tried to meld a little bit of how we would be providing notice in a situation like this, which wouldn't necessarily be by certified mail if you had it in person or it was emailed or mailed. So we did blend the rules of civil procedure a little bit and the existing procedures to make sure that we could fully calculate, okay, if this was in person, they received it on that day, they have 5 days. If we mailed it, and we would assume they would get it within those 3 days, that 5 days starts after that time. Because we wanted to make sure that they had, that an employee who had disciplinary action taken would know when they needed to file that appeal and provide that length of time. So that is how that is written, is it kind of addresses all possible methods of having had that delivered to them.
And then moving into that, just that next paragraph, again, within the 5 days of notice having been deemed received, the employee can petition Civil Service Commission. And then that clarifying language, so what happens if that falls on a weekend or a holiday? So if the appeal deadline falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, the deadline shall be the next business day. Any question or comment so far on, okay. And then on the second page now, the commission after having received such petition shall set a date for hearing or investigation no less than 7 days. And as you can see, currently the policy has a 3-day window. So right now it's no less than 3 days, no more than 30 days. We are suggesting that change to no less than 7 days and no greater than 45 days. The reason for that change is it is very unlikely that the employee themselves or the city could truly prepare for a hearing within a 3-day window. And so we think, in fairness to both parties, allowing more preparation time, but then also allowing you all time to review the documents is important. In terms of the 30-day window, because we are regularly scheduled to meet monthly with the civil service, by bumping to that 45-day window, if we have a disciplinary action that happens just within days of a meeting in, let's say, this month, then we are able to hit that next month's meeting date within the 45-day window. And that allows us to, whenever possible, to actually meet on those pre-scheduled dates. Sometimes that isn't going to work, and we do address that in as well here by including the language unless otherwise agreed upon in writing by both parties. And you probably recall we have had instances where the attorney representing our employee maybe had vacation or other trial dates and just was not available within that 30-day window as well. So we have at times gone outside of that regular window with the agreement of all parties and in consultation with the chair of the commission too.
Jill, just a quick question. The commission, having received such petition, shall set a date for hearing or investigation. I don't think we've ever conducted an investigation that I remember, but we have that ability to say, after reviewing some materials or before, or we'd like this further investigated as a commission? Is that how that reads? Is that what that's for?
Yeah, so there is that possibility that you might ask us to go back and investigate something further, or it is possible the city commission could engage you to ask you to participate in an investigation as well. So we did leave that verbiage in, although it would be highly unusual, as you all know, in your time with the Civil Service Commission. But I suppose it would be possible, and I'm thinking of circumstances. For example, today, the question was posed about whether we had video footage. And so you might ask us, to go back and find additional information before you reconvene the commission. That might be an example of further investigation. Nancy?
So further, so that could be after the initial hearing, always, or?
I think, the reference here would indicate a date for the hearing or investigation, so I believe it probably could be before or once the hearing begins, but I'm going to defer to Nancy on that.
Well, and that's a good question. I'm looking at the ordinance that is in the Fargo Municipal Code, and that is the language, so it was lifted from that. To my knowledge, that has not happened, and really at that point, you've received a petition, but you haven't received any background information. So it might be more appropriate to change that after you get the materials, if you want additional information or investigation, that would be something that we could take a look at.
Yeah.
Sometimes the ordinance as written doesn't necessarily work in practice, and so I think that if that's something you want to consider further, we could take a look at, because there will need to be ordinance revisions also, because the policy tracks the ordinance that's in the code, and so we'll be working on both of those for revisions.
And I honestly did not, reviewing the materials that you sent out, I did not think about a video question at that time. It didn't strike me until
Sure.
today. But I felt I had to bring it up. I thought if they would say, yeah, we have some video, that's pretty good evidence. So, yeah, I didn't think of that today, but okay, that makes sense, I think, what you just said. Further investigation after.
So
It'd be
we can add
fairly
some-
hard for us to have an investigation if we get the material, 3 or 4 days ahead of the hearing. So it's, I don't know exactly how we could do it. I suppose we could ask and possibly postpone the hearing if it were necessary. But in the years that I've been on, the Civil Service Commission has never done their own investigation. And not that they shouldn't or couldn't, but they never have, so.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can work on clarifying that verbiage, and I should mention too, you do have a copy of the ordinance there as well, because there are a couple of these changes that we're recommending that will require an ordinance change. And maybe when we get through the discussion here, Nancy, if you want to address that process then for ordinance change as well. Okay, so then as we get into the providing of the written information to HR no less than, it currently is 3 business days, but we are proposing at least a 4-day window there. And to the point that you made just a little bit ago, it is already a pretty tight window for you all to review the information. And so, we've added that weekday clarifier there as well, so that we're getting in at least 4, weekdays for you to review. Now with the proposed change to a 45-day window, that would allow a bit more time, but wanted to have some discussion about, especially when we have hearings that involve a lot more documentation, do you feel that allows time for you to really thoroughly review, the employee statement, the city's statement? Would you like more time, more of a window for that review time?
I think a little bit more time might be beneficial. I'm not talking 10 days, but maybe more than 3.
Okay. So if our meetings are typically on a Tuesday, would 5 business days ahead of that Tuesday, so then our deadline would be on the Wednesday prior. Right, if I'm, so, or the Tuesday prior. So do you have a preference? How many days?
Business days, right?
5 business days.
Okay,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday.
so 5 business days we wanted, okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds good, Michael. A little more time.
Yeah, because as Jill said, this one didn't have a lot. We've had some that were quite expensive.
Yes.
Okay, so we will increase that then to the 5 business days prior to the hearing. We did not make any changes to the section in terms of what information the employee or their representative is providing to you. Are there any recommendations that you have for that section? Or do you feel you're typically getting adequate information?
Oh, I think the information we're getting is adequate.
I think the information is good. I would just request that, like on the list of witnesses we receive, if their titles could be included in that information, just so we, as we're reading the materials, we're understanding who would potentially be speaking to us. And then perhaps to have everything we receive have page numbers at the bottom, so we can, if we ever need to reference something on a specific page. But the listing here is sufficient.
So including the titles and then page numbering those statements. Okay. Anything else in that section? Okay, then the next section is the employer appointing authority. And again, here we, in our proposed change, had just changed from 3 to the 4 days for the written information, but we would now change that to 5 to be consistent with the timeline that the employee is providing their written documents. We did include a clarification under B2 that neither party has the ability to compel testimony. And Nancy, do you want to provide a little more explanation on that one, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We, at this point, we're not exercising subpoena powers for this type of proceeding. That obviously would be available in a court setting. So looking at this, there was a question as to whether one of the employees' counsel had requested that an employee of the city of Fargo testify on their behalf. So we wanted to make it clear that that was not something, if that employee chose not to do that. They're certainly able to do that, and if they are willing, can participate in that manner, but not compelling that testimony.
Nancy, is there anything in here that precludes cross-examination of I don't know if there's, I haven't read the whole thing perfectly. You know, we don't allow cross-examination, which I'm glad we don't, but is there anything in the ordinance that says that you can't do it?
It actually is in the policy at a later time. We did discuss that there won't be cross-examination of the other witnesses. That unfortunately would just be argumentative, and we really are just trying to present the facts to you as known to us.
The hearings a lot of times took on a bit of a quasi-legal proceeding, and that was always kind of a problem in my mind, you know, and that was probably one of the elements was the cross-examination. Some attorneys maybe wanted to do that.
Right, and I agree. And of course, my role is a little different. There's sometimes counsel, sometimes not.
Right.
So we really are trying to make it that we can, you know, communicate with you directly rather than have to go through that process of objections. And and things like that. So we're trying not to make it quite as formal as a court trial.
And so to that last question, under hearing procedures, so section 2, number 1, at the end of that paragraph, we did add clarifying language that speaks directly to your question about parties or their representatives will not be able to directly question witnesses for the other party.
Right.
Okay, so then as we get into the format, so I'm on the 3rd page right now, as we get into the format, you can see we had some more extensive changes here, just again, adding some clarification. And I just want to refer back to one of the Civil Service Commission discussions surrounding the statements, the opening and the final statements. You all had a discussion a couple of hearings ago about whether you really want to be hearing from the employee themselves and the appointing authority themselves, or the representative of the employee and the representative of the city. And as you know, in some cases, just as in today's hearing, the employee did not choose to have legal representative here. And so the verbiage throughout this section, we really left the employee/representative for those both opening and final statements. Because again, there will not always be a representative. At times too, they might have someone with them who is not an attorney, but just it could be a peer or someone that they feel they want to have speak on their behalf. So we tried to leave that open, but just to walk through that section. So the opening statement by employee and representative, and then opening statement by appointing authority representative remains the same as the current policy. The employee testimony, if an opening statement is presented by the representative. And so we inserted this to allow or encourage the opportunity for you to hear directly from the employee if a representative did do the opening statement itself. And then any employee witnesses. So that is, we just inserted the word employee to clarify at that time that it's only employee witnesses. And then the commission questions of the employee or employee witnesses. And this was a change to allow those questions to occur right at the time of those witness statements while that witness statement is fresh for you rather than waiting to the end. So that's something for you all to consider if you do want to make that change. Then the appointing authority testimony, appointing authority witnesses, if any, and then again allowing commission questions of the appointing authority or appointing authority witnesses immediately following that portion. A final statement by the employee or representative, final statement by the appointing authority or representative, and then an opportunity for you to circle back, so commission additional questions to employee and or appointing authority and the party's witnesses. And then the last item then would be the commission deliberation as to whether the disciplinary actions were motivated by political or other improper considerations.
I understand that we cannot go into executive session. Is that
That's
correct?
That's correct.
You know, sometimes it's difficult to make it, you know, a lot of cases are pretty cut and dry, but there's sometimes we like to get together as a group and discuss it. But if that's not allowed through your open meeting laws, I guess we won't do that. And we'll make our decision on the spot, so. But we can postpone the decision until we can't postpone the decision until another day.
Meet again.
Yeah, another meeting.
That's correct.
Okay.
But all discussion is an open meeting.
That's correct.
Jill, I'm wondering if 2L those additional comments to either side should come before their final statements. Just,
Okay.
just a thought.
Is the thought to have it after, just in case any other questions come up from
From
their
their
final
statements?
statements? Is that why you put it after final statements?
That's kind of, it's an addition, it's a new thing. I mean, we couldn't do that today. That wasn't in the directions today where we can ask a final question. Is that
I'm
right?
gonna pull out just a
After.
clean copy of the policy here to make sure that,
Commission question.
I do like the change where it's the former employee, then we can ask questions, and then it's the hiring authority? What's the right word? I get it wrong.
Appointing?
Appointing.
Appointing
I don't
authority.
know. I'm gonna have to write that on a sticky note, put it up.
Yeah, right.
The appointing authority, and then ask questions. And then maybe it doesn't matter if the final round of questions is before final statements, and you might have a point that somebody might say something in their closing statements, final statements that, oh, now we have a question about that. So it was just a thought.
I could see it going either place. I mean, I understand where it's a little confusing if final statements and then we ask questions again.
Yeah.
But I could see that it's there if they say something in final statements that we were wondering about.
I like that. Because today, I think I did have a question, then it was over. I mean, we weren't allowed to ask any more questions based on today's format. I kind of like that addition.
So I think what I'm hearing is it's fine the way it's being proposed, perhaps.
okay.
Yeah,
That's what I hear Paul
it gives
say.
them basically two opportunities to question again, so.
And if I'm recalling correctly, I think we have had instances where commissioners have chosen to do that at that time too. Once you start discussing among yourselves, that might be a topic that you think, okay, we need clarification on that because I heard it this way and another commissioner heard it this way. So that would leave the door open for additional questions or discussion at that time.
Question on M, if I could. Does that that verbiage is pulled straight from the second paragraph on the first page. Does M need to be updated to include that additional language being proposed to add to that second paragraph of considering whether or not the employee decision was factually supported? Does that need to go into M as well?
That's a good point. We can certainly add that to M as well.
I will, thank you for that. I did also make a comment that we need to confirm the standard by which this committee is reviewing this information.
Thank you. Can we go back for a second to the second page at the top where we were talking about investigation and the hearing and investigation? Because are you referencing why that is there because of the ordinance, like 7-2006C? Is that where investigation gets pulled into this?
Actually, I am looking at 70305C. And that's in the, I'm not sure that you have that one. You have
Okay.
you have the civil service, but not the rules and regulations that are articulated in Article 703.
Okay, gotcha.
So we need to get you that as well. But that does say, the commission on receiving such petition shall set a date for a hearing or investigation of the reasons for the proposed suspension, removal, demotion, or discharge. So that's the way the ordinance reads.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
it does include the investigation there.
Thanks for the additional information.
And I think there's some question, I mean, I was going to say, you don't have to do investigation, and if this body thinks you don't want to be doing investigation, that recommendation could also be made to the city commission that you're presented the materials at that time, because of course, those are the materials that were being considered by the appointing authority when a decision was made. And so that's what you're reviewing was that decision made, and was it appropriate when with cause, so.
I noticed at one of our discussions went to the city commission, but there was an option for resignation that was offered to the city commission that was never offered to us. I mean, I don't know if that's an option or not, you know. The city commission voted 2-2 on that, and so our decision was upheld. but the offer of resignation was never offered to us. And I don't know if that's one of the options for the employee to ask us, or, you know, before we have the hearing, if we would allow that or not. I don't know.
I don't know if that's our prerogative. Yeah.
Yeah, I would, so typically in our disciplinary process, you know, we in HR and/or the department, right, either the leadership team in conjunction with us or the leadership team has had conversations or investigated reports to, you know, prior to taking the action, and then allows an opportunity to meet with that employee prior to taking action too, to make sure we understand their perspective of what has occurred. And so there is opportunity if an employee chose to resign prior to that, you know, that department head or appointing authority meeting with them and moving forward with termination. We have had instances where someone under investigation chooses to resign during that time. And we certainly will accept their resignation. You know, it doesn't change the documents, the investigation, that's there. But they may resign before we've actually provided a termination letter, or maybe sometimes even before that decision has been made, they may choose to resign. So there is a window where they know they've had this incident or a pattern of performance issues. They know and have been informed that, you know, we're investigating. So there is opportunity at that point. And Nancy, I don't know if you have a better response than that addresses whether the
it
civil
was strange
service
to me.
could recommend or not at that time.
It was strange to me that the city commission, he had the offer after our hearing, that he offered to resign. I'm surprised that he didn't do it with that offer beforehand. And I don't know why it kind of slipped in between us, but.
Yeah, I can tell you each incident has its own set of facts and circumstances, and, you know, it depends on those negotiations and discussions. I think that depending on how the employee responds at any time, that the city would consider, you know, what are available options, but not that this body is in a position to be doing really anything other than reviewing when we get to here. Was that decision properly made by the appointing authority?
So the decision to accept his resignation was after our hearing, basically after he lost. It was an option out for the city commission. But that option was always there before we had the hearing, that he could resign. Okay.
I would agree with that as well. And that is something that then the city and the city governing body, that the city commission would be able to engage in that discussion.
Still a little uncomfortable to go through all that and uphold a termination, and then they're allowed to resign. It seems a bit problematic, but I think that's exactly what Jacob was asking for today, was a resignation. He didn't want his job back. He wasn't asking for his job back. He was asking for this to be erased.
Yeah, he wanted it removed from his file.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was under the assumption that that's not what we're here for, is to make a change to the determination that the appointing authority has made, is whether we're upholding that decision or making that recommendation to the city commission, not to change it and make that recommendation. But
I would concur. Oftentimes we say we're not asking you to step into the shoes of the appointing authority. They had a difficult decision to make. They made it. And you have an opportunity to review what did they know, when did they know it, and was it supported on that decision?
Okay.
Jill, remember where we were?
I I'm just finding my place again, yes.
Down to number,
Hearing procedures.
Yes. So, yeah, we covered that whole section of the format. Were there any other discussion points in that section? I believe we landed on that you want to keep that opportunity for additional comments or questions open at the end.
yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Okay. Jill, I'm just going to pipe in here something I just thought of based on the hearing procedures today. We have the appointing authority testimony and appointing authority witnesses. I kind of put those in reverse today, and I typically do, depending on who is actively involved in the investigation and the staff involved. So I'm wondering if that can be left more to the discretion of the presenter for those, under those circumstances. Because under this rule, I would have had Desi go first.
So if we were to merge F and G, appointing authority and appointing authority witnesses testimony, but then that gives the freedom of the order?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's, and we wouldn't necessarily want to dictate how the employee testimony comes in either. You've got employee testimony and employee witnesses.
Sure.
We've got counsel, you might have them call a witness before their client speaks. So I think just giving that a little bit of leeway would be good.
Perfect. So we could merge the employee section and the appointing authority sections. Okay.
Well, Nancy, has the commission, we mentioned resignation, has the commission ever dealt with that issue after that police officer was allowed to resign? Was there any more talk about looking into resignations and codifying that process a little bit more than it is now? Did they talk any more about it, or Jill or Beth, I guess anybody can answer that. Is it just not, it's just an option all the way through? And
Meaning have it specifically in policy somewhere?
yeah, well, I don't know, I suppose I don't know if it's policy or, I don't know. Like I said before, we're upholding a termination. We went through a 5-hour meeting and upheld the termination, and then they had another long meeting and let them resign, so maybe I'm making something out of nothing. I mean, if there's no problem from HR's perspective, if somebody's able to resign after they've been terminated, I mean, I guess that's all right.
I think my response would be that that would not be the normal course of action. However, if our governing body takes that action and makes that decision, then, under those circumstances, we would follow that action. As Nancy said, each situation that comes before us, we kind of have to look at a little bit as a case by case too. We try to be consistent for similar type of infractions or performance issues, but the circumstances are always just a little bit different. And it would not be the normal or typical practice to allow a voluntary resignation after a termination meeting has actually occurred. So once that appointing authority has terminated, would not be a typical action that we would allow. But our governing body made that decision, and so we needed to uphold that decision.
Okay, let's continue on.
Okay, so the next section 3, findings and conclusions. We did bring that verbiage from the previous section to include whether or not the employer decision was factually supported and whether the disciplinary action was motivated by political or other improper considerations. So we issue that written statement of findings and conclusions within 30 days. And that's always in conjunction with the chair of the commission signing off on those findings and conclusions. The next section does not exist in our current policy, although it does in ordinance. So that's why you see this inserted into policy as well, the reference to the city commission appeal. So the language that's in strike through, that was just where I copied over the language from the ordinance. But as we reviewed some of the other timelines and clarification on, whether we're doing certified mail or email to the individual, that second paragraph then is really what we landed on as our recommendation. But again, just to clarify, this does not exist in current policy, but we felt that it was important to insert this information based on the ordinance that addresses this. So the
I agree, because that's what Jacob asked today, if he had any further options in this, and I'm glad we've added that paragraph, so if he would have read that, he would have known that was true.
Yes, yeah. And we will follow up at the time we issue the findings and conclusions as well to make sure he understands that opportunity. So the determination of the civil service will be mailed via certified mail to the employee's last known address. Additionally, a copy of the determination will be sent via regular email and via personal email if known, via regular mail and via personal email if known. The employee has 10 days from the date the determination is mailed to appeal the decision to the city commission. The appeal request must be submitted to the City of Fargo Human Resources Office within 10 days from the date the determination is mailed. And again, that piece would require an ordinance change to sync up the policy and ordinance. Most of the time, we have a personal email address, and that's going to be our quickest way of informing that person of the findings and conclusions and their right to appeal. Occasionally, though, in the past, we've mailed the letter via certified mail and requested a response, a signed receipt, but individuals can refuse to pick up that mail or to sign or to answer when that is delivered. And so by adding this clarifying language, we've made a kind of a more concrete timeline for all of the circumstances. And we've also committed to multiple forms of providing the information to that employee to ensure, again, that they know about their right to appeal. Any questions on that section? Okay. And then I think one of the things that we will discuss, but this is probably a discussion with the city commission, would be just clarification on the format of a city commission appeal. You've raised some questions today too about how that works when it reaches the city commission. And we have set some standards in, conjunction with the commission for length of hearing and the structure and the format. And that might be something that we want to include in policy as well, so that is clear to employees who want to go on and appeal the upholding of the action.
Yeah, I noticed the city commission has a 2-hour limit on their appeal, and sometimes I wish we did, but we have so much more information than they're ever going to have to receive that it wouldn't be possible. But I'm glad the city commission, they held it down to that 2 hours anyway. So.
Okay.
How long do you anticipate it taking to move this to the next steps and then for final approval for the potential next usage?
Yeah, so I think part of that depends on if you all want a little more time to spend with the policy, and Commissioner Wennes has not seen these changes as well. so we can get this sent out to you as well to just review our additional changes. From there, we typically will have a review by our department head, our cabinet group as well. Then we post for 2 weeks any proposed policy changes. We post those and send out notification to all of our employees so that they have a chance to review and provide comment as well. You all as civil service commissioners receive our policy proposed changes. We have a city attorney review, which has happened during this time, and then it goes on to the commission agenda. So it can take, if we move forward without any significant changes, I would say it's about a month to 2 month process. We do have other policies that can take much more time than that as we are reviewing and then going kind of back to the drawing board with them.
Is it necessary for us to have a formal meeting after we review these procedures or ordinance? Is it necessary for us to have a formal meeting to do this, or can we do it on the phone or agree to, if everybody does, it's not necessary to have a meeting every time we do something,
So to that's an open meeting question, and
Oh, back to that. Okay.
and my
Okay.
response is you can't take a vote without it being a meeting because it does have to be open to the public in that setting. So I think if you're prepared to move forward today with the changes, that could be done as a recommendation to us and to HR, and then also to if you want to convene in another manner, you can convene virtually as long as other people can participate, or by phone as long as they can participate, or at another meeting. But it does have to be noticed, and you can't take a vote without that being in a public setting.
Next meeting is the 12th of September.
I understand. Scott, you have a problem with the September 12th meeting?
I could more than likely attend virtually. Yeah, I can make that work, I think.
Would that be agreeable?
Yes,
Yeah.
if that works for
Does
you,
it, does it work for you, Anne Marie, the 12th?
Yeah, that would
Yeah,
work.
because we're going to have some other business to meet on at that meeting too. So one of which is, appreciation of our past members and so, yeah, I think it's important that we have that September meeting and then we can progress from there.
So at that time, we'll see this again with the additional changes we discussed here.
yes, we can bring those revisions back
Okay.
to do a final
Yeah,
review.
and that's in 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, so that would be great.
And we could certainly reschedule to a date that would work for all of you as well, since we have a scheduling conflict.
And I can make that, no, I'm just not in town, but I can step out of, it's the state HR conference.
Sure.
And I'm on that committee. But I can, yeah, no, I can do it. That's not a problem.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you. And then at our September meeting, we'll have the revisions that we've discussed in this policy, and we can vote and approve it then. Thank you. Proceeding on to the item that we skipped over is the appointment of the chair and vice chair. And I have a confession that I'm going to be done October 1st, so it won't be me. So, is there a motion to nominate a chairman of the Civil Service Commission?
And Jill is in the process of replacing me too. So.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
better. I spent 35 years doing this. Yeah, geez.
Pretty close.
Now, we have policies on harassment and bullying.
Okay, I'm sorry.
sure.
I'm sorry.
Well, I want to say,
I didn't use the foul language, so.
You did not.
this commission is going to be in great hands with these two new members.
Oh,
I
yes.
think this is really
Yeah, I
great.
think the two additions we
think
have
they're-
now are an accomplishment
They're
in
better than I can
moving
do
forward.
already, so, yeah.
So, is there A nomination for chairman and vice chairman for the Civil Service Commission. We have to have a nomination. Somebody's got to say something.
I don't know if this is appropriate. Michael, do you have an interest? You've been, I mean.
Well, I've done it before, if that matters.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think it,
That doesn't preclude me from doing it again.
Yeah,
There you go.
so is Paul, and so have I, so.
Oh, yeah, I make a motion to nominate Michael Wennis as the new chair of the Civil Service Commission.
Second.
Can I second? No, I can't.
Ann did.
Oh, you did.
I
Okay.
second.
Okay. Since no more nominations, we'll take a roll call vote, I guess. All in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
Mike, did you say aye?
Yeah.
I did.
Okay, good. Okay, now for the vice chair. And can I nominate from the chair?
Nancy? is-
I don't think I can. Robert's Rules of Order, I haven't read the whole thing, 'cause it's like
Yeah,
that thing.
I wish I had it right in front of me. Typically, that isn't done.
Okay.
But I
No,
don't know
typically-
that you don't have a veto either, so you can make a motion if nobody else does make a motion.
Okay. Do I sense a nomination for, do I hear a nomination for the vice chairman of the Civil Service Commission?
I nominate Scott Worth.
I will vacate the chair momentarily.
Let these two new ones.
I'll nominate Scott Worth. I'll nominate Scott Worth for the position of vice chair for the Civil Service Commission,
Second.
if he'll accept it.
That would be fine.
Okay, we have a nomination. All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
very good.
Okay, sensing. Is there any other new business?
There isn't, but, or not that I know of, but I do have a question, and this would, I would be probably asking Anne Marie and Nancy. You know, we talk about open meeting laws. Why is it that the Fargo Public Schools can have an executive session for employment matters, yet we cannot?
It's not as open as that. It's not just, there's no carte blanche executive session for employment matters. That doesn't exist in Century Code. There are certain, if you're talking about discharging a teacher for cause, if that's what you're referencing, there's a specific
You know,
statute.
I just do know that, you know, when I watch the meetings quite often, you go into executive session for,
Yeah, so the school board has been recently
would-
going into executive session for contract negotiations, but not specifically any employment actions.
okay.
So again, if there'd be a discharge for cause for a teacher, there's specific statutes in play for that. But there is not an executive session for employment matters in Century Code.
Okay.
I would concur with that, and Anne Marie mentioned statutory. The schools have different statutes with respect to some of the ability to close meetings, to documentation provisions under open records are somewhat different. And so the difference is the statutes, North Dakota Century Code, that relate specifically to the public schools.
Okay.
Well, sensing no new business, any more new business, the meeting will be adjourned.